All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. My name is Sam Inglot. I am the Deputy Director at Progress Michigan. Progress Michigan is a progressive advocacy organization, communications hub, and government watchdog group here in Michigan. I am joined not only by some of my colleagues and partners here in Michigan, but some fine folks from Florida as well. And we are here today because Ron DeSantis has decided to come to Michigan and speak at a local Republican Party event. And we thought it would be prudent to both educate Michiganders about the types of values that Ron DeSantis claims to espouse and how that sort of manifests itself in policy, as well as hear from some of the folks in directly impacted communities who have been working in Florida for a number of years. Today, I am joined by Florida Education Association President Andrew Spar, Adonis Flores, the organizing director at Michigan United, Barbara Zdravecky, the former president and CEO of Planned Parenthood of Southwest and Central Florida, and Leila Vallarino, the Senior Director of Communications for the Equality Michigan Action Fund. We will go through individual speaker comments, and then we will open it up for questions. We'll get rolling now. So again, when we saw at Progress Michigan that Ron DeSantis was coming here to Michigan, it didn't take very long based off everything that we had heard from Florida, seen across the headlines, to understand that the difference between Michigan and Florida under DeSantis's leadership couldn't be more clear. Since taking office, Governor DeSantis has done nothing but sow division and chaos while attacking the LGBTQ+ community, public education, voting rights, and communities of color, essentially silencing any voices who don't agree with his personal right-wing ideology. And I want to be clear, this stands in very stark contrast to Michigan, where our new Democratic majority and the leadership in the governor's office behind Governor Whitmer and Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist, they've worked to protect our rights and protect public education. In Michigan, while we fight extremist book bans, Ron DeSantis writes them into law. While we work to support teachers and educators, Ron DeSantis forces them to walk on eggshells and abide by vague rules for fear of losing their jobs or even facing charges for teaching what he deems as the wrong thing. And while we undo a decade of anti-union and anti-worker legislation, DeSantis and his allies in the legislature are passing laws that would dissolve unions that collectively bargain for better wages, benefits, and working conditions for working families. And while we work to expand access to the ballot and ensure every citizen has their voice heard, Ron DeSantis has worked to make it harder for Floridians to use their freedom to vote. His crusade against so-called wokeism, whatever that means, has resulted in laws and administrative orders built around nonsense right-wing extremist culture war buzzwords, creating a culture of fear and disinformation in Florida. And that's something that we're not about here in Michigan. The dystopian stories coming out of Florida should make Michiganders angry for what's happening to folks in the Sunshine State. But at the same time, it really should strengthen our resolve in protecting the progress we've made here in Michigan. Imagine your kids coming home from school and telling you the books were taken out of their classrooms, or imagine seeing curriculum whitewashed because your child's teacher wants to teach about slavery, but they're no longer allowed to. Imagine seeing your field of study in college disappear because Ron DeSantis has decided to ban majors or minors in topics that don't fit his right-wing ideology. Imagine coming to work at a university and being told all your emails are being searched because you had the audacity to serve on a diversity, equity, and inclusion committee. And imagine the police showing up at your door to arrest you because even though you were issued a voter registration card and you were allowed to vote, apparently you broke the law by voting. In Michigan, we have to imagine these things because we've worked hard to build something different. But in Ron DeSantis's Florida, they don't have to imagine because this is their reality. Michigan has proven time and again, we value hope over fear and inclusivity over division. Governor Whitmer is building bridges while Governor DeSantis is burning them down and building an authoritarian right-wing dystopia. I want to be very clear. In Michigan, Ron DeSantis and his culture of chaos and hatred is not welcome. And with that, I would like to turn it over to Andrew Spar, president of the Florida Education Association.
Thank you. And I think well said. And I'm going to talk a little bit about education and what's happening in Florida. And I'll start with the fact that I am a music teacher. I spent 9 years teaching violin, viola, cello, and string bass in Daytona Beach, Florida, in an inner city elementary school, where I saw firsthand the struggles that so many kids who live in poverty have in getting the education they deserve and need, and making sure that the schools and the teachers and the staff who serve our students have the support they need. You know, my school was a school that was called a hard to staff school. Yet here in Florida today, every school is a hard to staff school, as teachers and staff are walking out the door faster than we can hire them in the state. In January of this year, we did a survey of school district websites, seeing how many positions they were advertising for immediate filling. There were over 5,200 teaching vacancies in the state of Florida, and over 4,600 vacancies for support staff, our bus drivers, our paraprofessionals who work side by side with those teachers, our custodians, our cafeteria workers, maintenance workers, and others. That's nearly 10,000 vacancies in the state of Florida. And although we can't get a good grasp on the numbers now, we believe it is significantly higher, because every day you see posted on social media, another teacher walking out of the classroom, another support staff person walking out of the classroom. Or as a parent myself, my daughter, one of my daughter's teachers just left this Monday and no longer teaching in the school. Again, leaving my daughter in the last quarter of the year without a teacher. That's not okay. And that should be not okay for anyone. And I'm sure it's not what anyone wants in Michigan, because we certainly don't want it in Florida. You know, but Governor DeSantis is pushing this Betsy DeVos agenda in Florida. He is pushing and doubling down on vouchers and charters as he tries to divert billions of dollars away from Florida's public schools, where nearly 90% of children attend, depriving them of the education they deserve and need. And he talks about freedom, but look at what he's doing. He's pushing policies that take away the freedom of children to read books that they can connect to read books that excite them, to read books that are meaningful to them. He looks at taking away the freedom of college students to decide what classes they want to take, what majors they want to take, limiting those opportunities. He's taking away the freedom to learn and the freedom to teach here in the state of Florida. He talks about parental rights while he's taking away the rights of parents. I, as a parent whose daughter is about to go into high school, I do not have the right for my daughter to take an advanced placement course on African American studies, because the governor in the state of Florida said, I don't get that right. So this is not a guy who's promoting rights. He's promoting taking away rights. And then the rights of teachers, he talks about promoting the rights of teachers, really, while he's pushing legislation that takes away the rights of teachers to decide what to do with their paycheck, how to pay their union dues if they choose to be a member of their union, and how to run their union. At the end of the day, what Governor DeSantis wants to do, and we're seeing it here in the state of Florida, is consolidate power in his office so that people either do it his way or they can hit the highway. And we've seen that in Florida. He went after Disney, one of the largest employers in the state of Florida, one of the biggest economic engines to the economy in the state of Florida. He went after Disney simply for speaking up. He went after and removed a state attorney, Andrew Warren, in Tampa, simply for speaking out. He went after school board members and superintendents just for speaking out. And he's coming after teachers and staff who work in our schools, kindergarten teachers, pre-K teachers, high school English teachers, college professors, because we speak out. And he disagrees with us, and he sees us as getting in his way. That's not the values we share in Florida. I know that's not the values in Michigan or the Midwest, and it's certainly not the values in America. And that is why I think it's so important we're here today, as the governor goes around the nation doing what he's doing, campaigning for the future, his political future, while hurting the people in the state of Florida. And it's important everyone knows that. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Andrew. Up next, I would like to turn it over to Adonis Flores with Michigan United.
Thank you again for having me here. I myself am very concerned about the policies that Governor DeSantis is seeking in Florida, and the actions that he has taken against the immigrant community. I myself was an undocumented immigrant throughout my childhood and was very fortunate to benefit from President Obama's Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, which is now under threat in the Supreme Court. And so a lot of immigrants of different status, not just undocumented, people with DACA are at threat of losing their status. People with TPS, temporary protected status. It takes USCIS months to renew their green cards. I'm sorry, their work permits. And sometimes they get their work permit 3 months before it expires. So all of these issues, people with work permits, with HB visas and other kinds of visas, they're all at risk as well under these proposed policies, where in Detroit, for example, and other cities in Michigan, we have municipalities that offer municipal IDs precisely because under current federal ID, Real ID Act guidelines, it's difficult for them to get a driver's license or a state ID if their card is expired. And so we have people with TPS, people with DACA that are waiting for their work permit renewal, or HB workers that cannot get their driver's license renewed until they get that card that comes in the mail late. And so municipal IDs are a way of helping alleviate this, so they can have at least some kind of ID while they wait for their state ID to arrive. And preventing municipalities from doing that, it's just overreaching, it's unnecessary. And then the actions that he took against the so-called sanctuary cities, busing immigrants, migrants, asylum seekers from Florida to New York and other states, it's just inhumane. Doing it under false pretenses, telling them that they were going to be taken to a place where they could find work and housing. These were not asylum seekers that had just crossed the border. Florida does not share a border with Mexico. These were people that were in a better situation in Florida, but under false pretenses were convinced to go to a different state where they had, and dropped off, where they had no one to support them. So his policies are to create problems that don't exist. And this is with the purpose of creating fear, because he doesn't have real policies for real solutions for people's problems. That is the problem, is because none of his policies have real solutions to the problems that people have, to increase their income, to increase their quality of life. That he's pushing forward policies to create fear and division, and that is concerning. That is concerning on any politician from any party. So we don't need that here in Michigan. We want to encourage our state governor and the state legislature to actually pursue policies that will make life better for immigrants, because when they pursue those policies, everyone's life gets better. We were trying to get the Drive Safe bills passed during this year, and those bills would allow these problems that immigrants face with their driver's license being expired and having to wait until their new work permit arrives. It will help them continue keeping that driver's license. They can opt out of having a real ID. They can just have a regular license. They won't be able to get on a plane, but at least they'll be able to drive and keep their car insurance. So we want to go in the opposite direction, and we definitely do not need those policies here in the state of Michigan.
Thank you, Adonis. Next, I would like to turn it over to Barbara Zdravecky, the former president and CEO of Planned Parenthood of Southwest and Central Florida. Barbara? Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry. Thanks very much, and I'm delighted to be here this afternoon. Introducing myself as a registered nurse, a social worker, a single mom, a product of 12 years of Catholic school, and a proud Planned Parenthood CEO with 25 years of experience. And over 20 years ago, my team in Sarasota, Florida, opened the first licensed Planned Parenthood abortion center in the state of Florida, providing access and life-saving care to thousands of women across the Southeast. We operated also and continue to operate as a training facility for medical students and nursing students to provide quality of care and best practices in the provision of abortion services. But that's not all we do. And one of the things that I'm most proud about is that we started one of the first systems of care for trans youth and trans people and counseling and hormonal treatment, and continue to service men and women of all ages and all walks of life. So after the post-Roe world metastasized last summer, Ron DeSantis, really launched himself to attack and promote himself to begin the dismantling of reproductive health care as we know it in the state of Florida. Last year, adding fodder to his credentials to conservative voters, he signed a 15-week abortion ban, which is in effect right now, that included no exception for rape, incest, or human trafficking. And this week, it's actually about 1 year ago, after a vote this week by hostile senators, DeSantis is poised to sign a much more aggressive, restrictive bill than even the Texas legislation that launched this assault on women's reproductive rights in the country. This is despite a rebuke by the American Medical Association, the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecologists, and Physicians for Reproductive Choice. This governor's version of Free Florida has politicians at the cornerstone of the care between a woman and her doctor as they make decisions. It's an outrageous assault, really, on the fundamental right to access health care, attacking people who are disproportionately at risk, people who are poor, people who live in rural areas, LGBTQ people, and people of color. Simultaneously, this legislative action, that we are countering against this week, we see that Governor DeSantis is ready to kick off of Medicaid, those folks who accessed additional care through Medicaid during the COVID funding that were provided to the state. And of note, we know that Florida is one of 10 states out of 50 that has yet to provide Medicaid to folks who were available for expansion. So we're losing not only the folks who have Medicaid through COVID, but the million people who were eligible for Medicaid expansion that never got it because of the terrible treatment of people in the state of Florida by this legislator group and by the governor. Really, the truth is, we know from experience that 67% of Floridians support legal, safe abortion access. And the governor really has stripped them of that right. The truth is, Florida is not free. We're going to look at other problems too that we were talking about that are not being currently addressed by DeSantis in the legislature. I've been up there a couple of times, and we know, based on statistics as well as our own experience, that Florida is the most unaffordable state in the nation right now. Rents are soaring. I live on a little barrier island in Southwest Florida. People can't afford to buy a house, let alone, rent a house, let alone buy a house. Property insurance is skyrocketing. Utility rates are going out of the roof. And yet our legislature is in a session, and Ron's traveling around the country, drumming up support for his next ambitious, whatever he has in mind for himself. DeSantis has injected his own extreme right-wing politics into every aspect of our lives, from kids in the classroom, as Andrew said, to women in the exam room. And quite personally, it's simply intolerable for me to get up every morning understanding that my 2-year-old granddaughter has less rights in this state than I have had. Florida pretends to be a pro-life state, but how hypocritical is it that DeSantis this week, behind closed doors, signed a free carry bill for the state of Florida, a Florida that is beset with gun violence and can only do more to cause grief, anguish, and fear to Floridians. So I want to talk to my friends in Michigan, the Michiganders, and I have a lot of them around me right now because, as I said, I live near the beach and we have a lot of you here vacationing as winter visitors. I know you'll be going back after Easter, but I want to congratulate you on your work last year because you have become a beacon of hope for us in Florida as you went to the polls and did the work that you did. And now it's going to be time to have your voices heard again. So I want you to trust me and let you know that you can't afford to buy what Ron DeSantis, the traveling salesman, is trying to sell you. Trust me in Florida, and we're happy that you continue to turn bluer every year. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Next up, I would like to pass it over to Leila Vallarino with the Equality Michigan Action Fund.
Thank you, Sam, and thank you everyone for having us here today. For those who aren't familiar, Equality Michigan Action Network is Michigan's statewide LGBTQ+ political advocacy organization. Equality Michigan Action Network has been working for decades to advance LGBTQ+ rights in our state. And recently, we have witnessed a sea of change towards equal rights for all. Unlike Florida, Michigan is now positioned as a national leader in LGBTQ+ equality, thanks to good policies enacted at the statewide level. For example, last month with bipartisan support, Michigan codified nation protections for LGBTQ+ people in housing, employment, and public accommodations through our Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act. Again, this legislation received bipartisan support because Michiganders are aligned that equal protections under the law is a good thing for everybody. Michigan also allows transgender individuals to change the gender on their driver's license or state ID without requiring surgery or a court order, making it easier for trans people to have legal identification that matches their gender identity. We have also seen progress in terms of LGBTQ+ representation in politics in Michigan. In 2018, we elected our first openly gay Attorney General, Dana Nessel, and re-elected her last year. We also set a new in 2022 for the highest number of LGBTQ+ identifying electeds in our state legislature to date. Between electing openly out, re-electing strong LGBTQ+ allies at the top of the ticket, like Governor Whitmer or Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson, Michiganders have made it clear that LGBTQ+ equality is a top value in our state. LGBTQ+ friendly policies succeed here because in Michigan, we believe in fairness and in treating each other with dignity and respect. Ron DeSantis does not reflect these values that are important to Michigan. He has a history of enacting discriminatory policies against the LGBTQ+ community in Florida, especially against LGBTQ+ youth. Transgender girls and women are prohibited from competing in women's sports in schools and colleges in Florida, a clear violation of their rights and freedoms. Florida's Don't Say Gay law prohibits classroom discussion about sexual orientation and gender identity, which leaves LGBTQ+ students more vulnerable to stigma, discrimination, and harassment, as well as lacking in support or resources for their mental well-being, which undoubtedly impacts their overall academic outcomes and future success. DeSantis has also opposed efforts to protect LGBTQ+ individuals from discrimination in housing, employment, and public accommodations in Florida. And on top of supporting bad legislation and vetoing pro-equality legislation, Ron DeSantis has appointed individuals to key positions who have a history of opposing LGBTQ+ rights, like opposing marriage equality and opposing adoption by same-sex couples. Overall, Ron DeSantis's actions and policies in Florida are downright discriminatory against LGBTQ+ individuals and have negative impacts on their ability to access healthcare, education, and other services. Michiganders rejected an agenda of hate pushed by officials like DeSantis in November, and instead we are working to make Michigan a national leader in LGBTQ+ rights. Together, we are creating a more welcoming environment for all families who live here, all employees who work here, and all tourists who visit here, no matter how they identify or who they love. So today, on the eve of his visit, Equality Michigan Action Network wants to make it known that Ron DeSantis's hateful rhetoric and harmful anti-LGBTQ+ policies are not welcome in our state. Thanks. I'll hand it back to you, Sam.
Thank you, Leila. So again, in summary, we've heard a lot about the negative things the bad things that are happening in Florida. But again, what are we doing here in Michigan, right? We are empowering working people in the unions that represent them. We are protecting abortion rights and reproductive freedom. We are standing with the LGBTQ plus community and expanding their rights and ensuring that Michigan is an inclusive place. We are ensuring that every Michigander has access to the ballot box and working to update and improve our voting rights. We are historically funding public education and working to empower teachers and ensure that we have safe, inclusive classrooms that teach accurate accounts of history to every student. And we are standing with the immigrant community that enriches the diversity and the spirit of Michigan. So Ron DeSantis, that's what you need to know about Michigan as you get set to come here tomorrow. Michigan does not stand for your agenda. Thank you. Now, with that, I would like to open it up to questions from members of the media. If you do have a question, I ask that you just use the raise your hand function and start by identifying yourself with your name and your organization, and then asking your question, and if there's somebody you'd like to direct it to. All right. Seeing no questions, again, if there are any questions, any follow-ups, feel free to shoot me an email at sam@progressmichigan.org. Happy to take any questions you have. I want to thank my friends in Michigan and my new friends in Florida for joining us today, speaking out against Ron DeSantis's dangerous and harmful agenda. It has no place here in Michigan, and I think the last few years have certainly shown that, and we're going to continue to show that in the months and years ahead as well. So thank you all for joining us. Have a great day.